General George, welcome and congratulations on your nomination. Thanks for your lifetime of service. Mrs. George, thank you as well. I know that several senators have addressed with you the recruiting challenge. I'd call it the recruiting crisis that the Army faces. I think this is the #1 challenge, certainly the most urgent challenge you have to address. Some things are beyond your control. You can't control rising wages in the private sector. You can't control a shrinking teenage population or 20-something population in our country, but some things will be in your control. And I would just add my voice to all of those other senators about trying to address those concerns, about expanding eligibility pools, making it easier to push waiver authority down from the general officer level to the field or even company grade level, addressing some of the perceptions of political correctness in the military and so forth. This is a tough challenge. I hope you succeed. The nation needs you to succeed, but I think it's probably going to be one of the main things that your tenure is measured by if you can't succeed. Second, we discussed this yesterday. I want to put it on the record, though. The caisson platoon at the Old Guard is a very special unit. Normally, we wouldn't talk about platoons or even regiments at a hearing like this, but the Old Guard is a regiment of national importance. It doesn't just perform at ceremonies at the White House and state funerals, but it also performs military honors funerals every single day. And because of, right now, the stand down of the caisson platoon, there are not caissons being used with horses in Arlington National Cemetery. And every day that goes by that's not happening, that means a veteran who earned those honors and a family who is there for the funeral is not receiving them. So can I get your commitment on the record that the Army does not intend to end or eliminate the caisson platoon?
Senator, there's no intention to eliminate that capability.
And I know that the Army has laid out a path forward. I think it is up to a year, maybe a little bit less than a year now. Can I get your commitment as well that you will try to do everything you can to accelerate that process and get horses back operating with the caisson platoon in Arlington National Cemetery?
Yes, Senator, that's our goal, to accelerate.
Okay. Finally, I want to address the ongoing saga about the Army's combat fitness test and gender-neutral standards. We've talked about this. You've heard me talk to your predecessor and Secretary Wormuth about it. For years, the Army said they would have gender-neutral standards under the combat fitness test. Last spring, at the last minute, the Army decided not to do that. This committee and the NDA directed it to have gender-neutral standards in the combat arms branches. Secretary Wormuth and her army of lawyers found a way to say that they didn't need to do that. So here we are this year with Congress being more directed. The House of Representatives, in language proposed by Representative Waltz, includes a directive that the Army should impose 1, gender-neutral standards in combat arms branches, and 2, those standards have to be higher than they are for the Army as a whole. Because frankly, the Army standards are kind of pathetic. The Army standards require you to run 2 miles in 22 or 23 minutes. And I say run. I want the record to report that I use sarcastic air quotes with my fingers when I say run, because moving 2 miles in 23 minutes is not running. Maybe shuffling, but it's not running. This committee tried to have the same approach, at least I did, that Representative Waltz proposed, but the Army came back to us and said they would rather revert to the old Army physical fitness test, the old-fashioned 2-mile run, push-ups, and sit-ups, and use gender-specific standards. So what I sense is an ideological opposition in the Secretary of the Army's office to having gender-neutral standards for the combat arms branches. I just want to read you something and see if I can get your agreement on it. While it may be difficult for a 120-pound woman to lift or drag 250 pounds, the Army cannot artificially absolve women of that responsibility. It may still exist on the battlefield. The entire purpose of creating a gender-neutral test was to acknowledge the reality that each job has objective physical standards to which all soldiers should be held, regardless of gender. The intent was not to ensure that women and men will have an equal likelihood of meeting those standards. General, do you agree with that sentiment?
Yes, Senator, I do.
Thank you. It was given by one of your officers, Captain Kristen Griest. She may be a major by now. She was one of the Army's very first female infantry officers and one of the first graduates of the Ranger School, so I think she should know what she's talking about. So, to be clear, I don't want the Army necessarily to return to the old Army physical fitness test. I'm fine if they keep the combat fitness test. I do expect the Army to have gender-neutral standards for the combat arms branches in which ground combat roles have irreducible physical demands. So can I get your commitment that you'll work with this committee and with the House Armed Services Committee to move forward in a way that achieves your objectives with the combat fitness test, but also ensures that we have gender neutral and higher standards for those demanding combat arms branches?
You have my commitment, Senator, and I would like to, I do like the Army combat fitness test. I think it's a great test. I think it's changing the fitness culture. So far, we've been doing this through the active component for this last year, and we're getting ready to do it in Compos 2 and 3, so the National Guard and the Army Reserve. I was thinking back to when I first came on. I think this is important because this will help us set a good baseline and decide where the standards are. When I first came in, enlisted in the Army, I know by the time I was a lieutenant, the standards were a lot different, a lot higher, and that's what we need, and that's what we need to do. So we would like to, you know, take the time to make sure that we're doing this appropriately and have them set the right way.
Good. I'm glad to hear that because, again, it wasn't my idea to say the Army should revert to the physical fitness test as opposed to the combat fitness test. It was the Secretary's office and some of my Democratic friends who had such an ideological opposition to gender-neutral standards that you and I and Captain Grease all think that the Army should have. So I'm happy to work with you on that. I'm happy for the Army to have gender-specific standards in profession or in branches and MOSs that don't require those same kind of demanding physical positions like an intelligence analyst or a systems network or any other kind of jobs. But in things like the infantry and artillery and armor, I think we can all agree that there are irreducible physical demands that we have to ensure male and female soldiers alike can meet on the battlefield. Thank you.